Alright, let's get started. So, to start with, we are just going to create a new project. Let's create a new folder. Rate my poly. Open that up. Now we have our new folder. Okay, just the side here, we just have my terminal, so I'm just going to go to that folder. Rate my poly. So now we are in the empty directory. So the first thing we want to do is we want to initialize this as a Git repository. So we're going to say git init. Cool. We now have a blank Git repository. Inside here, we want to create two folders. One will be our server, which obviously will hold all our server files, and client, which will hold all of our. Why did I do that? I do not know. Trash. Client, which will hold all of our client files. That will hold all of our actual web pages pre-render. Later on, we'll have another file. Might as well just create it now. Called public, and that one there is going to house all of our CSS, all of our client-side JavaScript. All right, so what we want to do now is we want to navigate into our server file, and we want to initialize a new node package. So I'm going to say npm init, throw in a couple of boilerplate stuff, rate my poly, version 0, description, entry point will be server.js, which we will create. No test command, git repository. So that will be toby@uat.ratemypoly.com/repos/rnp.git. Okay, so that one there, the uat.ratemypoly.com, that is not a registered domain at the moment. It's literally just registered under my known host. So you can get to it just by its IP. If you want the IP, let me know. If not, just leave it at that for now. No keywords, also Tobias Stokes, because I'm working on it right now. Once you guys start, throw your names into it. Just using a standard license, and there we go. So that has created our server.js file. We need to add to our scripts, first of all, our start script, which will be node server.js. So that will be once the server is run on our physical server. And the next one is dev start, which will be when we're running things in development mode, which will be nodemon server.js. Okay, I don't worry about using these because I have nodemon locally installed on my machine. To do that in your terminal, just say npm I for install nodemon-g, which will install nodemon globally. Okay, so I want to split up, there we go. Okay, so what I've pretty much done there is just split the terminal into two. So now let's create that server.js file, which will hold all of our server code and be kind of the hub for it. And let's tell nodemon to start running that. Server.js. There you go. If you don't know what nodemon is, it's pretty much just constantly watching this file, and every time there's a change, like I save something, it automatically restarts the server for us. And that's pretty much it. And anytime I want to bring something up over there, console.log true, it's going to pop up in our console. Perfect. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is install our first dependency, which will be Express. So let's say, right up there, I want to bring it down here. npm I Express. Express is going to handle all of our requests from our clients and our responses back to the client. So over in our server file, we want to say our dependencies. Ignore my spelling, especially for the comments. Express is equal to require Express, remember you asking once before, Timmy, what is const? Const is just creating a variable that can't be changed. You have a variable which is declared by let or var, and const just means that you can't change it. You can't change variable later. All right, so now that we have created our dependencies, we want to create our global variables. Okay, and the first one is our app. It's going to be the main part of our app, and we're going to want to use express as a function, just like that. And then we want to work on our app config, which is just using that variable there. So the first thing we want to look at is saying we want our server to listen out for requests on a certain port. So we can say app.listen. Okay, so what we need to put in here is the port number that we want to listen for. I'm not going to hard code that in there because anything that's can be susceptible to exploitation later, we don't want to have hard coded in, so that's going to sit in an environmental variable. I'm not going to display it on the screen, but I can show we need to install .env to use our environmental variables. That's done. .env, there we go. Okay, now we want to bring that out of the screen. I just dragged that to my desktop. Why did I do that? Go away. Okay, so just off the screen, I am going to be opening up those environmental variables just separately. Yeah, as I said, I don't want that on the screen. Fine, I'll open up in another terminal. New window. Make my poly server. That's it. Nano.env. Cool. Alright, so I can edit that as we go. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create in my environmental variables a port. Port is equal to that one. Oh, it's W. Idiot, there we go. Alright, so I've saved that into my environmental variables. So now let's just throw another one into the environmental variables just to test that everything's working correctly. Let's say test is equal to RMP. So now let's add that environmental variables in there. So I'll say require .env, and we don't want everything, we only want the config part of it. Alright, so now let's console log that process.env.test to make sure that it's working. Right there, we're getting that RMP that I stored in the environmental variables, which is great. Now I'm going to delete that. Okay, cool. So now we want to bring in that port that we're using. So I'll say const port is equal to process.env.port. Okay, so just in case that port is not available, or you might need sudo privileges and we accidentally don't code that in, or just for any situation, we want to have a backup port, which will be port 3000. So if you can't find the port in environmental variables, it's going to pull through that one. So now we're going to say add our port to listen to. We're going to create an anonymous function that brings in an error, and we're going to log out to our console if there's an error. If there's not an error, we want to say server started. Run that, and server started, so there's no errors. The next thing I wanted to do was also add a .git ignore. So that means every time we push something to our Git repository, it's going to ignore these files. And the first one is going to be the .env. We don't want that going to being pushed up just in case somebody intercepts it halfway through. We want to control these ourselves. Okay, and the next one is node modules, and which is that file right there. And the reason for that is that file is full of thousands and thousands of shit now dependencies, and it'll take forever to upload. So what I've done is every time we push our code to the server, it'll automatically reinstall that node modules folder based on what's inside our dependencies in package.json. So it just saves a lot of time and effort. All right. So I'm going to show you what's popping up in the browser now. Something I'm also going to say is, as I'm doing this, I'm not going to go full on into it, creating everything right away, because you're not going to understand everything. For example, site authentication. If I just throw everything in there with get and post requests and whitelists and blacklists and roles, it's going to be very hard to understand. So I'm going to do everything one little step at a time. If there's errors that I know are going to come up, if I remember, I'm going to let the error come up, and that way I can explain why the error is there and how to fix it and why it's a good thing that the error has popped up and why we need to fix it. All right, let's start off with, let's just comment out this line right here, which is saying we want to listen to a certain port. And let's bring up our web browser, go to localhost because I'm hosting on my local machine, and it's not picking up anything. Error code during connection. So now if we uncomment out this one to say we want to listen on that port, we refresh our page, saying cannot get slash. Okay, so what this means is, cannot obviously, get is the method that it's trying to get request from our server, and slash is the route it's trying to get. So we need to set up a get route on slash. So let's do that now, just something very, very basic just to tie up this video. Okay, so let's come down here and let's create some routes. Routes can be very big and lots of lines of code, so let's actually create another folder for that. So we're going to create routes, and inside there we're going to have an index.js, which is going to handle all of our routes. So now let's call that inside our server file. So we're going to say routes, our const routes is equal to require dot slash routes. How we want to tell it to use that. So we want to use our app.use, and just like we saw on the web page, it's going to be on the slash route. And on that slash route, we want to look in our routes file. And you notice it's come up with an error over here. The reason for that is it's looking into this routes file and it's not sending anything back to our server file. So we need to do that. Let's start off with a dependency. And this one will be our router, which will require from Express. But we don't need everything from Express because we've already got that on our server file. We just need the router part of it. Down here, we're going to put our routes, and we'll put that in a second. Right now, let's just clear up that error. And now we want to export. Module.export is equal to router. So essentially, that's just sending this router variable back to the server page. So now let's save that. The server started, so that's working fine. But as you can see, we're still not getting anything on our web page because we have to make that a route. So we're going to use our router variable .route. Just like before, we want to put it on our slash route. And we want to make it a get request, which is just like on our page here, our get request. Okay, so this is going to pull in two arguments, which will be request and response. Request is anything the client requests from the server, and response is anything the server responds back to the client with. And just something very, very simple, say response.send welcome to rate my poly. Save that. Now if we go back to our page and we'll refresh it, welcome to rate my poly. Perfect. So that's all we're going to do for this lesson. That's all we're going to do for this video. On the next one, we're going to start creating the page and renders and page layouts. So, yeah, that's it.